happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum, and the monitor's not on.
Yeah, they'll show us soon. I'm Ann Northrup, and it's been a heck of a week, and not just because of the horrible massacre in Boston.
No, and we do also want to alert our free speech viewers that we're going to be they are going to be in pledge mode April 29th through May 12th, and possibly a third week. And they'll be limiting us to one showing a week, maybe a Tuesday showing as well, Saturdays at 11 p.m. Eastern, and a Tuesday afternoon showing. Whenever you miss us, of course, you can see us online, podcast, all that kind of stuff. Get on our email list. Write me at andyhum@aol.com.
But you can go to our website at gayusatv.org to access the podcasts, and you can find us on YouTube and on blip.tv.
Right. You know, we have been talking about the meningitis scare, and our guest later in the show is going to be Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis, who is an assistant professor of medicine at NYU School of Medicine, and he directs the Men's Sexual Health Project, and he's going to talk about how meningitis is transmitted and how it's not transmitted and how you can get the vaccine. And he's also going to talk about HIV prevention. He does a lot of that work and testing, and the role of post-exposure prophylaxis and pre-exposure prophylaxis and all this. So stay tuned for that.
Exactly. But at the top of the news, they're falling like dominoes. This last week, it was Uruguay and New Zealand opening marriage to same-sex couples. Ireland taking a big step towards it. We'll fill you in on all the latest.
But things are a lot less optimistic in Paraguay, where the leading presidential candidate slurred gay people rather violently.
I think he's going down for that, but we'll see. Election this coming Sunday. Terrible story out of Kansas City, where a gay man was forcibly removed in handcuffs from his husband or partner. Are they legally
I heard
married?
that they were married elsewhere.
Okay. Hospital room, despite having all the legal papers, married or not, to be there.
Right. Nike has signaled that they'd like the first out gay male player from one of the big four pro sports to sign up with them.
Just do it.
While NFL star Kerry Rhodes has felt compelled to issue a statement saying he's not gay.
I guess that's a step forward from saying, I hate gays.
And the National Hockey League has announced an initiative to support gay athletes.
Right. Sydney, Australia is having a to-do because the government tore up a road to get rid of a rainbow-colored crosswalk that had been created.
That's triggered a worldwide movement of coloring roads with rainbows.
Planting flags and putting rainbows on your leg.
In theater, we're going to review Berry Gordy's trip down memory lane, Motown the Musical.
It's good.
As well as the British musical Matilda and the world premiere of Joseph Keckler's I Am an Opera.
And we'll also review, the restoration of the magnificent Shirley Clarke 1967 movie, Portrait of Jason, about an African-American gay man.
Yeah. Okay, so on to the news.
Yeah, well, let's start in
New Zealand.
Other countries. You want to start in New Zealand?
Well, yeah, New Zealand just passed their same-sex marriage bill 77-44. It requires a royal assent. This means the governor has to sign it. And
the Queen.
The same-sex couple, we representing the Queen, same-sex couples are expected to begin marrying in August. So this is a great breakthrough, really, in that part of the world, essentially. I guess they're the first.
Well, New Zealand has had more progressive governments in recent years and has done more for LGBT people. Australia, next door, thought of as the sort of sister country by proximity, has been less forthcoming, but now a lot of Australians say, fine, we're going to New Zealand and getting married.
Yes, and the difference in Australia is that the leaders of the parties aren't allowing conscience votes on a same-sex marriage bill in Australia, which is what it was allowed in New Zealand, and that's how it passed, 77 to 44.
In France, they moved up the same-sex marriage vote. They're accelerating their path towards that, probably because there has been such controversy that they want to get this done. But the right wing is really reacting badly. They're threatening violence. They've been doing more counter demonstrations where scores of people have gotten arrested. It's getting ugly in France.
And let's get our Uruguay tape rolled. We're going to run it as B-roll.
Really good news from Uruguay, which did, as we told you they were on the verge of doing last week, pass same-sex marriage, legalizing it.
It got the backing of 71 of the 92 members of the Chamber of Deputies who were present. That's overwhelming.
And this videotape is actually quite moving because, as they vote for this, the balcony erupts, and we just want to let you watch this for a minute.
Shot of Marie Antoinette there. Oh, somebody with big hair. They were having a ball. It is this thing, as in New York, that seems to trigger a great deal of joy when it happens.
Well, if they're turning us from second-class citizens into first-class citizens, that's a pretty big leap. And that, just to remind you, was Uruguay.
Right.
Now, in neighboring Paraguay, they're in the midst of a controversy. They have a presidential election coming up this weekend on Sunday. They have an establishment sort of right-wing candidate who is favored to win.
Horacio Cortes.
And a more progressive or left-wing candidate who is not given as much of a chance. But I think that may just have been reversed because
Mr. Cortes said I found out that, first of all, he compared gay people to monkeys and likened same-sex marriage to believing in the end of the world. And then the Times didn't give this quote properly, but I think what he said was, if my son was seeking to marry another man, I would shoot myself in the balls because I do not agree.
The New York Times
called
just
it testicles.
Testicles, but admitted they were not using the actual language.
But they put it in the quote anyway.
But people are up in arms about this.
And the opponent says, I don't support same-sex marriage, but I think it should be discussed. It's certainly something we should discuss.
Well, because their neighboring country, Uruguay, has just legalized same-sex marriage. So I think this may have an effect on the election on Sunday because people are really reacting to this. They're really upset that the front runner has been so crude and discriminatory. As
we're taping, the Colombian Senate is supposed to vote on a proposed law to give us same-sex marriage rights. Now, in case you've forgotten, the Constitutional Court there ruled in 2011 that they had to do something about giving us equal rights. So that's why they have to act, but it's not clear that they're going to pass same-sex marriage.
By the way, I want to go back to New Zealand for a second because the same-sex marriage law they just passed is the only one we have seen that uses this language, that marriage shall be open to any two people regardless of their sex, their sexual orientation, or their gender identity. Now, that is certainly true of all these marriage laws, but they are the first to spell it out in this way.
And they're working on spelling it out in Ireland, where they had a constitutional convention, and 79% of the conventioneers voted in favor of having a referendum on civil marriage for same-sex couples. They have to change their constitution. They don't ban same-sex marriage in the Constitution. They have to change family law there, which is in the Constitution. Now, hold on to your seats. I mean, Ireland's become much more progressive, but they had a referendum on divorce a while ago, and they voted it down. They did not allow it.
Entirely different thing.
Yes. I'm just saying, but Ireland has come a long way, and
well, maybe a warning that you don't want to rush into marriage in Ireland if divorce is still a problem. So that is international marriage news, and we will then...
I'm not saying divorces now. I'm not sure.
Oh,
we will be corrected, but I'm just saying that they vote on these things on referenda.
All right. So domestic marriage news.
Oh, Nancy Reagan supports same-sex marriage, according to Patty Davis. She's just speaking for all the family members except Michael.
But Nancy is still more or less alive, so you know,
we may hear from her.
Presumably, she's had something to say about
If she
this.
wants to speak, would you let your mother speak, please?
Well, Patty sort of couched her language. She said, first of all, I disagree with my half-brother Michael, who said Ronnie would never have supported same-sex marriage. I'm standing by what I said. But I have talked about this with my mother, but I don't want to speak for her. So I'll just say that she didn't disagree with what I said about Ronnie last week.
That Illinois Republican chairman, Pat Brady, who stood up for same-sex marriage, and there was a move to oust him, and he overcame that. Well, they're working on getting rid of him slowly through a new process.
Well, yeah, they're going to. They are putting a succession in place, and they may get rid of him in 6 weeks. As they were meeting to discuss this, things got a little violent there. The Tea Party faction tried to crash the meeting. They were banging on the doors. They had to call the cops to get them to move away. This is arousing a lot of passions.
Now, Delaware is set to take up its bill on same-sex marriage and get that process started, and the governor there supports it and those kinds of things. But I'm disappointed to read that they will end civil unions if they pass marriage, which has happened in some other states.
All right, here's the question I've been wanting to ask you.
Go ahead.
What do you want in civil unions that's not in marriage?
There are some gay people and some straight people who do not want to get married but want to enjoy the rights because they don't want to be part of that institution.
Well, how would you define them differently?
Oh,
You're the one who has always said to right-wingers just exactly what rights do you not want us to have.
Right.
And I'm asking you, how
all
would
the rights,
Yes.
and there are people who do not want to associate themselves with marriage, and that's okay.
Well,
that should be okay.
Just with the word?
Yes.
That's the only difference.
Well, and as you know, in this country, it's all balled up with religion and everything. So I don't want to get married.
Well, it's not in a civil marriage, and we've worked very hard to make that difference.
We're trying. I wish we would separate it entirely, and then we wouldn't have these problems.
That would be a different case. But I want to know if you talk about retaining civil unions as an option, how are civil unions defined as different from
Legally,
marriage?
they wouldn't be different. Okay?
Then you're only talking about a word?
Yes, and that's all they're talking about at this point in most places.
And I have a little trouble with that.
Okay.
At any rate, in Delaware, committee of the House was debating and voting on the same-sex marriage bill today. I'm sure we'll have updates on that next week.
And meanwhile, Florida has introduced a bill. I don't know how much help this has, but it's to essentially ban any place in the state from doing domestic partnerships. It's an absolute outrage. It's one of these right-wing legislatures, of which there are many in this country, because a lot of us don't pay attention to who's in our state legislatures. And I hope that it's not going anywhere, but
well, it is part of a national effort by the right wing to do this state by state. And there are proposals like this in Indiana, Arizona, Louisiana, and Michigan.
Brought to you by the Koch brothers.
And
who supposedly support same-sex marriage.
Oh, did they ever say that?
Oh, yeah. They don't
care. I missed that.
They don't care.
Well, in Florida, this particular proposal is brought to you by the Darden Restaurant Group, which includes Red Lobster and Olive Garden, and the Disney people, who have been the most pro-gay company for years. Why are they suddenly looking to repeal domestic partner benefits?
Let's see if we can stop them, shall we?
Well, it's got to be about money. Okay. Rhode Island's Senate may take up the marriage bill finally next week. And in Nevada, there's a fascinating development. There's a lawsuit pending there by same-sex couples to get the rights to same-sex marriage. They lost in the original court of jurisdiction. That's being appealed. And Nevada has a state constitutional amendment forbidding same-sex marriage. So now there is a proposal in the legislature to repeal the constitutional amendment. Now, because it's a constitutional amendment, it would have to be passed by the legislature in 2 consecutive sessions and then go to the people for a vote. But in the midst of considering this repeal, because of pressure, they have added a clause that would go right ahead and legalize same-sex marriage. So, in spite of the fact that, like many other
You'd be
states,
voting for same-sex marriage at the same time.
yes,
That you repeal it.
Yes,
good idea.
So, but it's going to take till 2015 to do, or 2016 to do it
unless the
that
courts
way.
really get on our side.
Exactly.
In Hawaii, a court has ruled for a lesbian couple that was turned away at a bed and breakfast. They didn't want to let them stay there, and they've been reminded that that's against the law. To discriminate in that way.
And in Richland, Washington, a gay couple wants an apology, or they will bring a lawsuit against a florist who is refusing to sell them flowers for their wedding.
And then there is the couple in Missouri. This was a huge story this week. A guy was in a hospital.
Oh, it's Kansas City, Missouri. I said Kansas in the headline.
Okay.
Sorry.
This guy's in the hospital. His husband was visiting him, and the sick guy's brother comes in and says, "I don't want him here." And the hospital just removes him. And he says, wait a minute, I've got power of attorney, I've got the medical, you've got all these things, you can't do this to me. And they put him in, they get a cop, they put him in handcuffs, and they take him out. They say he was disruptive, but that's apparently not true.
Well, they were. Both he and the brother got in a big fight. And what they did was take him out in handcuffs. They got a restraining order against him.
They used gloves because he was gay, and they were worried about AIDS. This whole thing is just grotesque. And
they did nothing for
the sick guy is lying there saying, "I want him here."
Yes.
And his wishes are ignored.
Yeah. This couple had several previous hospital visits of this guy who's sick. Alan Mansell is the guy who's sick. Roger Gorley is his partner, who was handcuffed and ejected.
Right. It's the Research Medical Center in Kansas City, Missouri.
They had been there several times before. The hospital had treated them as partners, had given Roger full rights to make medical decisions, to visit, no problem. But when Mansell's family showed up for this particular hospitalization, suddenly all bets were off, and the hospital acted as if they'd never seen this couple before or had any record of them being a couple. I have them listed as civilly unioned. And
I see that in another story as well, but he referred to him as his husband.
Yeah.
Federal officials are on this because there is a federal law that says if you get Medicare money, Medicaid money, which everybody does, basically.
Every hospital.
Right. Then you have to respect same-sex partners.
And as this story came out, it turned out it is not the first case since the Obama administration made that rule where that rule has not been honored. So now there is pressure for them to enforce this rule. The new Obama budget would let federal employees add same-sex partners to their health insurance policies. That would be nice.
It would be nice if we could afford health insurance policies.
Well, and as long as we're on the subject of hospitals and health, Dr. Ben Carson, the right-wing Republican who has been
Johns Hopkins neurosurgeon, famous
savior
guy.
of the Republican Party, who then came out and made anti-gay and anti-same-sex
comparing
marriage.
us to bestiality and
has
things like that.
now withdrawn as the commencement speaker at Johns Hopkins. Yay.
Sic semper tyrannis.
Yeah.
All right. The Empire State Pride agenda here in New York is kicking off a big $250,000 ad campaign to try to get the transgender rights bill passed. It would have been nice if we included it when we passed the sexual orientation bill in, what was it, 2001 or something?
Whatever.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you want see their campaign or information about getting involved in lobbying, you can go to prideagenda.org. They have a lobby day on the 30th of April in Albany.
And then there was this transgender woman who has now been banned from an Idaho grocery store. This is in Lewiston, Idaho. Transgender because the police said you went into the wrong restroom, kind of a thing, and then basically took out like an order that she may not use the women's room anymore.
She may not go into the grocery store anymore. She is banned from the whole store.
Outrageous.
Chicago police have installed 2 private changing rooms with showers for transgender prisoners and others who want privacy. That's a little step forward.
The California legislature is moving this ban on essentially the Boy Scouts from getting public funds and things like that because
no state support for organizations that discriminate, but basically targeting the Boy Scouts.
It's called the
here.
Youth Equality Act. It's moving.
No tax exemptions.
Right. I think that could be some. We're going to have to discuss this. I mean, obviously, I don't think that the state should be involved with any of these kinds of groups, but it's going to bring in a lot of other groups, I think, that discriminate. Any church group does.
And it needs a 2/3 vote of the legislature to pass this. Yeah, well, let's go after the church groups. I don't think we're going to make progress on that.
That's what I'm saying.
But the state and localities have non-discrimination rules, and therefore they should not be giving special privileges to groups that discriminate.
I agree with that. I think everybody should cut down on that.
Yes.
But they want to take away their tax exemption.
Well, yeah.
Well, let's take it away from the churches then, too.
Yeah.
Okay.
In Florida, the DeSoto County School District has backed down under threat of a lawsuit from Lambda Legal Defense. They will let Amber Hatcher and her classmates celebrate the GLSEN Day of Silence. The school was trying to stop that. And the Day of Silence is April 19th, which is probably the Friday.
Okay. Coming out after dying didn't seem to hurt Sally Ride. They're going to name a ship after her at the
research vessel
at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography on behalf of the Navy.
Yeah, the Navy puts out the ship in 2015 and names it RV, research vessel Sally Ride, and assigns it to the Scripps Institute of Oceanography.
Anybody want to demonstrate against Jeremy Irons with me on April 24th? I'm thinking of doing it. Send me an email. He's appearing at the New York Times building about his documentary Trashed, after trashing us.
Andy Hum at AOL.com. Being alone in those demos has not stopped you in the past.
Not in the past.
Garrison Keillor.
Just stand out there with a sign.
The North Carolina legislature wants to stop gender-neutral dorms on University of North Carolina campuses. Why? You know, what do you care? John Barry is leaving the Office of Personnel Management. He was the highest-ranking gay man in the Obama administration. He was there for a 4-year term. There's some rumor that he may be appointed ambassador to Australia. And his place is being taken temporarily by the General Counsel of the Office of Personnel Management, Elaine Kaplan, who is a lesbian. Acting director.
Michigan Republican committeeman Dave Agema was giving a radio interview on homosexuality, and he said it's already being taught in a lot of schools now. And the next thing that will occur is your kids will come home and say, I think this is a good thing and I want to be one.
We're very chic. And sports news, a couple things. The National Hockey League has joined the You Can Play project, which was started by people in the hockey field, to train and counsel teams and players on LGBT issues in a broad, league-wide way. And as we continue to hear rumors that some pro athletes are going to come out soon, Nike has announced that they want to endorse the first out gay male athlete, or maybe several of them.
But the first one is not going to be Kerry Rhodes. There was a picture of him with his arm around one of his friends, and he said, that's caused some rumors regarding my sexuality, and I just want to let you know I'm not gay. But
heaven forbid.
He's not anti-gay, at least.
And Mark Cuban, who owns the Dallas Maverick basketball team, has said, I'd love to have gay players on my team.
Yeah. And we told you about the murder of Lou Rispoli in Queens, New York, in October. That still has not been solved, even though there have been some sketches out.
Yeah.
Well, they're going to do a big memorial for him on May 11th and a concert for him on May the 3rd. Again, I'll have that in my email if you're interested in that.
And as we are taping, we've seen the headlines that there's an arrest in the Boston bombing case. We don't know how that will turn out. This is 3 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. But there is a little controversy because gay groups have been pointing out the Boston Police Department gay liaison in some of the pictures as rushing into the scene and helping, and they've said, oh, look, there's a gay hero, and other people are saying, well, why identify him as gay?
Because we're all proud of our own.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Some other
back to international news.
Yes, in Sweden they now have a gender-neutral pronoun, hen, which is going to be used for people who don't want to be called, what's the other one? Han or Han or Hun. I mean, they're coming up with the third pronoun, as some other cultures have as well, including this one.
Han means he, and
Han. Well, no.
H-A-N means
yes,
he.
there you go.
H-O-N means she.
Okay.
H-E-N is what they've put in the National Encyclopedia as a gender-neutral pronoun.
All right.
Secretary of State John Kerry has promised to advance LGBT issues as a central part of worldwide human rights engagement by the United States.
If you thought the Pope was really going to be more liberal, he's not. He's continuing with the persecution of American nuns.
And Peter Tatchell, the great British activist, is going to be meeting with the new Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, this week. In fact, before you will see this show.
Let's just hope he doesn't make us sick bee. Anyway, I'm just...
All right, well then let's go to Sydney, Australia, where there's a controversy because for the famous annual Mardi Gras celebrations there in Sydney, someone painted a crosswalk in rainbow colors, and everybody thought this was so charming and delightful that they left it there.
Right.
And it became a tourist attraction, and everybody was quite happy about it.
And the traffic people said, oh no, people are sitting down on the street, it's a hazard, we have to... So they, well, we're going to show them what they did?
Show us the local news report of what happened in Sydney.
Yes. No, no luck. Well, there
Maybe
it was. Those were the rainbow stripes in the street.
They dug them up.
They tore it up with it was horrible. So what people are doing is they're now painting these things all over the place with chalk, including in front of the house of the guy who made it get torn up.
The government guy. And they are planting rainbow flags in a sort of grassy area in the middle of the intersection there. And so it's become a field of rainbow flags. Do we care that Richard Branson, the owner of Virgin Atlantic, is paying off a bet by dressing in a dress and heels and makeup and shaved legs to be a flight attendant on another airline?
That sounds like the best thing to do.
It sounds like it's, let's humiliate him by dressing him up.
Demeaning.
All right. Are we ready to move on to health and AIDS news?
Yes.
Is there a doctor in the house?
Come on in.
There's a doctor in the house.
Welcome. Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis.
Nice to meet you.
Daskalakis.
Andy Hum.
Nice
Good to see you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
You are an assistant professor of medicine at NYU School of Medicine, and you run the Men's
Sexual Health Project.
Okay.
That's me.
And you do HIV prevention, you do testing, you do it in bathhouses, you do it in clubs, all these kinds of things.
Private sex parties.
Private sex parties, circuit parties, you name it. We go everywhere.
You are on the ground, and we want to know what's happening, especially, but we're going to start with the meningitis scare.
Sure, sounds good.
Because, we've been, everybody's reading alarming headlines about especially gay men being exposed to this. Why don't we start by just talking about meningitis itself, how it's transmitted and how it's not?
Sure. So meningitis is a very general term, and it has to do with inflammation of the membranes that surround the brain and the spinal cord. So very specifically, what's going on now is a kind of meningitis that's caused by a bacterium called Neisseria meningitidis, or meningococcal meningitis.
Okay.
So but it's bacterial versus viral.
Exactly. So there's all flavors of meningitis, and this is the flavor that you don't want. It's the one where up to 1/3 of people who come down with it may potentially die. Meningococcal disease.
And pretty quickly.
It can be meningitis, it can cause pneumonia, it can cause a spectrum of disease, but the thing of most concern recently is that there's been an outbreak in the population of men who have sex with men, initially in New York, and now there's a signal of some stuff going on in California.
23 cases in New York, 7 deaths, and we have these reports from LA, from California. We've got, if we can get those pictures up. No, not now. We can't. Our director's inside here. I'm just going to show you some of them, because in one case, the guy is perfectly healthy one day and he is dead the next.
Yeah, it's an awful disease. And I think I think a lot of people know about meningococcal meningitis because it's the one you hear about in college dorms. Where one person will have it and they'll get very sick, and some of them will die or have permanent injuries, and then everybody else has to take antibiotics or get vaccinated. In fact, to get into college dorms, you have to either prove vaccination or have someone sign a waiver that you've been vaccinated against meningococcus.
All right.
And this is one where you get a fever, you get a stiff neck, any other symptoms of?
Yeah, those are the main ones, the ones of most concern. I mean, like I said, meningococcal disease can be more than just meningitis, but when it's meningitis, it's photophobia, which means that bright lights bother you, neck stiffness, and a headache, along with fever. So those are really the danger signs that require urgent attention.
You just go straight to the emergency room.
There's no questions asked. If you feel like if you have these symptoms, especially given the fact that there is an outbreak in our community right now, it's go see a doctor ASAP. The faster you get to treatment, the faster you can prevent complications.
So what I'm hearing, and I was with a group of friends last night who said, how dangerous is this? How much attention should we pay? Should we be getting vaccinated? Should just a particular population be getting vaccinated? Should we all be getting vaccinated? What's the story?
So, I mean, this is an outbreak. It really is. The 23 cases that have been reported in New York have all been among men who have sex with men. Very often, New York has cases. Usually it's around 6 a year. So this is a big deal. Yeah. And it's in a very specific sort of social situation or sort of component of the community. So I think the guidance from the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene is excellent to consider vaccinating or to vaccinate all HIV positive men who have sex with men. And then they've really expanded the circle to men who have sex with men who are HIV negative, who may have either intimate, that means sex, or close, does not mean sex, that means kissing, cuddling, or proximity. To other men who have sex with men in New York.
But let's go back to transmission, though, because
it's not sexually transmitted.
It's not.
So explain that. How it is transmitted?
It's transmitted by droplets, by aerosol droplets, and so legendarily, we all know that from the infectious disease perspective, that droplets go about 3 feet. So if you're in about 3 feet of proximity, you could potentially stay away. If you're in 3 feet proximity, then theoretically you can transmit droplets, which is where the meningococcal bacterium exists.
And kissing is a very efficient way of transmitting it.
It is. So close
as opposed to oral sex or anal sex or any of that stuff.
I mean, so there's going to be debate about whether there's a sexual transmitted element, but it's really proximity that has to do with it. And so it's proximity and duration. So the longer and the closer you are with somebody, the more possibility there is of transmission.
But we all rode the subway to get up here. I mean, so why isn't it getting around like into, as they used to say, the general population?
Well, very often things that start in one segment of the population can spread out. So I can't guarantee, nor can anyone at Department of Health or anywhere else, so I can't speak for it because I don't work for them, but right now the outbreak is among a very specific sort of group, and that's men who have sex with men. So the target is to sort of deal with this virtual dorm. It's not a dorm, it's not enclosed, but it's a component of the population that at least has some borders. Obviously they're fuzzy because not everyone is disclosed. But the goal is to sort of get the highest impact population with a vaccine because it's expensive and really hard to get a hold of. So the idea of vaccinating 9 million people, many of whom may not be at risk at all, versus 100,000 people where you can actually achieve that goal and impact transmission is what they're doing. If this spreads beyond, then of course their guidance will spread beyond our population.
Now, it's my understanding that, yes, you can get it, you get sick very fast and very desperately, but there's this whole population of people who are carrying it, who are asymptomatic.
That's right.
I don't quite understand the difference there, but the point is you're not going to get it just from people who are obviously sick and on their way to the hospital.
It's not the person with the headache and the fever potentially that will transmit it, though they can transmit it. And if you are a contact of someone who is a case of meningococcal meningitis, it's really important to seek out antibiotics for prevention. So that's another topic. But asymptomatic carriage is out there, it exists, and it's probably pretty common. what makes someone's meningococcus invasive? People don't really know the answer, but that's why vaccination is important, because if you carry immunity, you can prevent that transmission.
Can you be tested to find out whether you are carrying it?
So a lot of people ask that question who get vaccine. The answer really is, theoretically, it's possible, but it's not really indicated.
Okay.
Okay.
And about access to the vaccine, you just referred to it as expensive and hard to get. Is there, and there's been some controversy about how much the city is supplying it. What's the current status of that?
So the city has a couple of routes where they supply it, one of which is their own sexually transmitted infection clinic. So they do provide the vaccine there.
You can show up there, it's free.
Yep.
And you might have to wait for a couple of hours, along with everybody else who's waiting for other kinds of tests and things like that. But I have several friends who have accessed that already.
Another option is just go to your doctor, call first, because not all of them stock the vaccine. So it's important to see. And very often it's covered by insurance, and in some cases it's not. In fact, the Department of Health just put out a memo to providers about reimbursement and mechanisms of doing that through insurance. So that should be out there in the world. And then lastly, community-based organizations such as GMHC are providing it free of charge as well.
And when you talk about targeting the HIV-infected population, is that because with compromised immune systems, you're more likely to get sick from this?
So it's partially that, and also because the beginning epidemiology of this outbreak was among HIV-positive men who have sex with men. So that's why the recommendations kept spreading. It started out with pretty much only HIV-positive men, and then it spread to a geographical area, and then just pretty much the entire MSM population with some limits.
And they have an outbreak in Southern California where apparently the response has been even more criticized than even in New York. We have a picture of a 33-year-old guy, Brett Shad, that's him. He was he went to a Palm Springs
to the white party.
circuit party, and he came back and he was dead the next day.
Well,
he also took a trip to China 2 weeks before that. I don't know if that weighs into this.
Well, no one knows yet is the real answer.
And the other guy up there, his name is, he's 30 years old, was 30 years old. His name is R.J. Spoon. His partner brought up his case. He died back in December, but he wants everybody to know about it, and he wants to learn people who might know how he got this and who might have seen him or been with him or those kinds of things, so that we can try to get this thing under control.
Okay. Have we covered enough about meningitis?
Well, I think it's a great thing to speak about, especially on Gay USA, just so folks get the word. Okay. I've got to be honest, it's important to get the word out.
That's why we're happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Let's move to HIV. In particular, because what we see are rising rates of infection among young men having sex with men. You are out there on the ground, so to speak, in all these places where men are having sex with men. What are you observing about what people are doing, why they're doing it, what they're, fill us in on the current picture.
I mean, I'll start off with the young men who have sex with men. I think that they've really not experienced a lot of the bad old days of what happened with HIV. And I mean, we're also the victim of our own success in many ways. So if you look at any sort of gay magazine or gay newspaper, there are ads for antiretrovirals that talk about it's easy, 1 pill a day. And so the great news is it is easy, 1 pill a day, and the bad news is it's easy, 1 pill a day. So it's hard.
And the 1 pill a day has some side effects that we don't always talk about.
And not everybody
can do it. Right. And so I think that the effect of sort of really getting HIV disease to the point where we're calling it a chronic manageable condition like diabetes makes people feel pretty good about it. But you realize diabetes has major complications even if you're well managed. So it's a push-pull because you want to sort of affirm that everything is going well with HIV, because it is compared to what it used to be and will go better and better in the future. But at the same time, the messaging, I think, really to especially the younger men who haven't had the experience of folks getting sick around them, really sends a message to them that, if you get it, and you deal.
So the people that you deal with who are going to sex clubs and things like that, and we hope having protected sex, what is it that makes people use protection and take care of themselves and prevent themselves from getting HIV?
Well, so I wish there were a great answer. That would be the magic bullet from the perspective of behavioral science. Like if we had a good answer as to how could we sort of engender that desire in someone to always have protected sex. I think that sadly the answer is that spontaneity tends to beat over logic frequently, especially in those venues where in certain circumstances, if there are condoms everywhere, frankly, the venues are great about it, the city's great about it, but in certain circumstances, if they don't have a condom right there, or it's the heat of the moment and they're not thinking about it, they're sort of emotional and sort of their sexual selves really take over, and even people who intend to use condoms will have major slip-ups.
So in those cases, you're starting to recommend, well, not starting, but it's been around for a while, post-exposure prophylaxis. How many people really take advantage of a 28-day drug regimen that they have to start taking within 72 hours?
Yep.
Preferably as soon as possible, like right away.
5 minutes after is even better.
What are you finding in terms of people taking advantage of this?
So the first thing is that we, in our group of people at the commercial sex venues, at the bathhouses and sex clubs, we actually surveyed them to see what they knew about post-exposure prophylaxis. Only 36% had ever heard of it, which is a shocking number, considering that they're potentially at the front lines of risk.
I think ignorance is rampant. I'm not at all shocked.
That's why you're here.
I'm shocked that 36% had heard of it.
Right? But then also, I've never asked how many docs know about it. I mean, so I'm sure the number is not much better outside of this sort of immediate community of people who provide healthcare to LGBT folks and also HIV.
So how hard is that to obtain? Now, you're right there at the sex club. Could someone come down after a condom broke and start taking it with you? Would you have it there?
So the answer is we don't have it there, but boy, do we make it easy. Through our program, we have something called Project 3600. It's called 3600 because the New York State guidelines are started in 36 hours, but we follow the CDC guidelines, so 36 to 72 are okay by us. So if someone has an exposure, they can call our hotline, which is on our website, and that links directly to me in New York, and I go over their exposure, and if they have an exposure that's significant, we call a starter pack into our a commercial pharmacy, and they can go right on over, pick it up for free, and start the medicine. And then we work with them the next business day to get HIV tested and all of the other testing, as well as to troubleshoot how they're going to get the rest of their med covered.
And not to discourage them, but it's not 100% effective.
So who knows? There are very few studies. There's really not a good efficacy number to quote. In occupational post-exposure prophylaxis.
You get stuck with a needle in a hospital.
Exactly.
That kind of
From a known HIV positive patient, they think that it's probably around an 81% reduction in risk.
That's pretty good.
That's a guess, though. It's bad cohorts, bad studies. But it's a good number. I mean, it's pretty good.
It's great that you're available and doing this, but it seems
an onerous task
crazy
for one man.
For one person to take this on. And don't we have to have a system that is much better educated about
I think that the answer is yes. A more coordinated system is needed. There are other places that do this. So Mount Sinai has a great program that does post-exposure prophylaxis in New York that's really pretty slick and expeditious and sort of client-centered. And then frankly, a lot of the ERs do it. But I mean, we actually asked our folks, where would you like to get your post-exposure prophylaxis? And the ER was the least popular place, actually being surpassed in popularity by the bathhouse.
Why don't we start? Look? We used
and don't we need a better term like morning after pill rather than?
Well, it causes confusion.
Yeah,
a lot of confusion.
Why don't we, like we used to have on the subways and the buses, lots of AIDS education programs, and this would seem to be a prime one that we ought to have, that everybody gets to see, because even if they're not going to take post-exposure prophylaxis, it educates them that HIV is still out there and they need to be concerned about it and all that kind of stuff.
Get tested as part of the message.
Let's do that. Why don't we do that?
I think that's a great idea.
But I think specifically a post-exposure prophylaxis advertising program that says to people, if you've had unprotected sex, if a condom is broken, whatever, if there is a chance that you have been exposed to HIV.
Call Dimitri!
Well, I've got to say, there is something out there on the web that's pretty good, and it's out of Roosevelt Hospital. They have something called PEP 411.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds good.
It's great. They have like a little video, like a little sexy, like user-friendly video about post-exposure prophylaxis, and they try to consolidate all the city resources in one place.
But there's also pre-exposure prophylaxis.
Yeah, that I think
Let's talk about that.
You're
pushing. That's been just recently approved within the last year. And how does that work? And what are your hopes for it?
So, if post-exposure prophylaxis is event-based, pre-exposure prophylaxis is just risk-based. It's saying, I am in general someone who's at risk for HIV, and rather than sort of wait for an event and like the time frame and running to get prescriptions, I'm going to take a medicine every day that has evidence and has been approved to prevent HIV infection.
But on the other side of the coin, why not say, I'm someone who's at risk, but I'm going to, rather than take a pill every day, which may have its own consequences,
sure.
why not wait until I've actually had an event, and then I can always get the pills?
So it depends on how many events you have. So, so if you're someone who has an episode every now and then, every few months, every year or so, with a condom lapse or break or whatever happens, then post-exposure prophylaxis is probably right for you. But if you are at continuous and ongoing risk for HIV because of a lot of high-risk behavior, then PrEP is for you.
Well, are sex
Pre-exposure.
workers using these?
So that's a perfect community for pre-exposure prophylaxis. And I think that there are some efforts to try to encourage that. Among them, the problem, of course, has to do with funding.
Yeah.
So if they're insured sex workers, which I've not met very many
Wow,
of,
yes.
then maybe they can access it easily.
Yes.
But there are not a lot of demonstration projects going on quite yet to be able to do that. But I'm sure that's coming down the line, down
I
the pipe.
see another subway campaign being formed.
Indeed.
But all of this goes to the point of really the government, the population, everybody caring about health, which is not universal.
Yeah.
I want to go back
Sure.
for a second, though, to just the knowledge base of HIV. Certainly, we, being older, living through the epidemic, know that there was this very critical period when people were literally dying in the streets, and you could see it and touch it, and it was right next to you, and that was the incentive to pay attention. And we don't have that these days. And I worry that people, rather than making decisions not to have safe sex because they think they can go on a pill or it's not that big a deal, really don't even know enough anymore. And I wonder what you're seeing in terms of people's general knowledge levels.
I mean, I definitely think that the media, just education in public health education in general, has really sort of gone by the way of HIV being a chronic condition. That it all sort of stems from there. The urgency seems to have fallen away, which means that the messaging has become a little bit more like background noise. So I think that though there may be efforts at education, like it's just a background noise in the back and it's not sinking in. I feel like, you know, the example of meningitis right now is really amazing because I have seen our community rise up in a way, or starting to rise up in a way that is very reminiscent of like my friends are dying on the street and I've got to do something. Right. So I feel like that fire is what has to go back at HIV.
Well, especially since this is, if it's in many cases incurable and it's going to kill you quick.
Right.
I mean, that people have gotten that message.
And people do still have the echo in their heads, and they think we were a little late on HIV. We really have got to be on top of this time.
I mean, I agree with you. I think that there's an education lapse.
I worry that people don't think about it at all.
Well,
it's not that they're making bad decisions based on what they know. It's that they don't know anything.
I think that it's optimistic to think that they're making decisions based on knowledge.
Yeah.
I think that the reality is that they're just making decisions, and it's just, you know, they're kind of feeling around blindly and don't even know about the threat.
So when you are in these sites, in the parties, the clubs, the bathhouses, do people respond to advice to be safe? Are they getting tested, which I always think is too late, but you know, how do they respond to the message directly there?
So I would love to say that they listen to every word we say, but I feel like very often we go back into deep background noise. So there's a lot of counseling, there's a lot of promotions of safer sex. There are literally, the venues are bathed in condoms, like they're everywhere. They do such a good job of getting them out to their clients. But it's just, in some ways, not an issue. And that's what the problem is.
But the city still has the power and had it and did close commercial establishments where unsafe sex was going on. The city's not doing that anymore?
So technically these venues live somewhere in a sort of obscure place from the legal perspective. So there's always a threat of them being shut down.
But there was also the push to say keep them open because that's where you're going to get the education, that's where you're going to get the condoms. If you drive it further underground, then you're really driving people away from information.
And frankly, now that, you know, if the commercial sex venues are like going to the supermarket, then the phone apps and the internet is like ordering groceries for home delivery.
Exactly.
So, I mean, you'd have to close someone's bedroom and turn off their iPhones in 2013 for that to matter. You know, accessing partners is so easy via technology that the venues are really our closest sort of place where, you know, you can see the top of the iceberg of the risk happening in the city. There's a lot more going on below, and a lot of it is happening in private
And what about those venues, Scruff, Grindr, all those places? Are they contributing to HIV education?
So I don't, you know, I can't tell you how much of their bandwidth they give to education, but definitely they do give some banner time to education. They even gave banner time to some of the meningitis stuff.
Okay, so what makes you most optimistic at this point?
I really think,
Hopeful.
I think that with changes in healthcare reform and with the changes that we're seeing biotechnology-wise with PEP and PrEP and all of the sort of things that we see that can actually prevent HIV in a very direct way, I really think that this is our chance to change what HIV care means. So I really think that what our job should be, people who do HIV work and sort of planning for HIV clinics, is to say it shouldn't just be an HIV clinic anymore. It should be a risk clinic, something where we can bring in everyone who potentially is at risk from the PEP perspective, sexually transmitted infections and pre-exposure prophylaxis. So at a great example, cardiology. A cardiology clinic, do they just see people who've had heart attacks? No.
Yeah.
Do they see people at risk for heart disease? Yes. By being engaged in the sort of infrastructure that supports the preventative counseling that is critical to biomedical interventions, I think that the future is going to be really bright when we realize that the prevention package that we can't grab, that we keep talking about with PEP and with pre-exposure prophylaxis is right in our HIV clinics. We just have to change.
And the website that you want people to check out is hivinfosource.org.
Yep.
Okay, and you can get all this information and more there. Dr. Dimitri Daskalakis.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you
for your work.
Thanks for having me.
Come back frequently and fill us in.
And if
would
you ever
love
get
to
any
come back.
news, just
Give you
shoot
a
us an email
drop
and we'll
email.
announce it.
Yes,
Sounds great.
exactly.
Okay.
Thank
To
you.
our
Thank you.
worldwide audience.
Nice.
Thank you.
Okay.
And thanks to our associate producer, Bill Ballman, for bringing Dimitri to us.
He's
you,
been
Bill.
nagging us for months to do this, and he's absolutely right. Thank you, Bill. Okay, we're going to slide you out and move on to entertainment news. Just to, oh wait, we have a little more AIDS news to cover before we do that.
Yeah, Governor Cuomo was holding up medical marijuana in New York, blocking it.
Well, the Obama budget has more money allocated for the global fund to fight AIDS and tuberculosis and malaria, which is a good thing, but less money for the President's Emergency Fund, and people are freaking out about that, although the President's Emergency Fund was created by George Bush when he didn't want to give money to other countries, work with other countries around the world. He wanted it to be just a U.S. effort. So I kind of like the fact that it's switching over to the Global Fund. Also in the Obama budget, states would be able to use federal funds for clean needles, more money for research and U.S. programs. The Senate has a pretty good version of this that's even better than the Obama version. The House's is worse.
Okay. Have a sip of water. We were done with AIDS news? I learned a lot today. It was a good segment. I'm going to go back and play it again when I get home. All right, let's talk about what's going on with entertainment news.
Yes.
We saw a show together, and we stayed for the whole thing, even though it was 2 hours and 45 minutes of musical joy. Motown, the musical. This is by Berry Gordy, who was in his mid-hundreds. He's the founder of
Mid-thousands.
of Motown, the label.
Hitsville, USA.
And other labels, and there's a picture of the Jackson 5, or the representation of the Jackson 5, and that's what this is. And it's it's not a waxworks. But obviously all the great hits from the Motown people are portrayed, weaved into the story of Berry Gordy going over his life, which, as you say, is a little cheesy.
Well, I will take pride of place here as the person of the right age to have had this be the soundtrack
Yes,
of
I'm
my
a youngster.
youth. Yeah. No numbers, please. But I adore Motown. It's what I have carried with me throughout my life, and I was a little nervous about going to see this because I don't like these recreations. But I have to tell you, and them, I loved it. And it's a cheesy play. It's turning Berry Gordy the monster into a hero, which is really hard to do. Yeah, he's heard it. But the music is so well done, and I wouldn't have necessarily believed it was possible. But
well, he knew his music. It was Hitsville USA. He discovered all these people. Yeah. He's the one who nurtured all these people, and they betrayed him. You know, as soon as they got really big. I mean, it starts in 1983 when they're having the 25th anniversary of Motown, and that's when they've all gone off to CBS Records and everything else. And he's not so sure he wants to come back to listen to them.
He does.
Oh, you're giving it away.
Yeah, but the performances are great. The dancing is great, and I sat in my seat and danced for 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Now, I saw Matilda, which is supposed. I don't know why I avoided it in London. There's a scene from it. That is the Miss Turnbull, the headmistress of the school that Matilda goes to, played by a 6'5" man with hairy legs.
It's a Roald Dahl book.
This is very much like Panto in Britain, where people get up in outrageous costumes and do crazy things at Yuletide, and that's supposedly how this got started. You know, Ben Brantley says it's the best thing since sliced bread. It's got a lot going for it, for sure, but some of it I found a little disturbing. I like
Matilda, Motown. What's your?
I would pick something in between.
Okay.
And there's something in between is at Dixon Place. I Am an Opera by this Joseph Keckler, who I didn't know. He's a young gay opera singer. He writes and composes. This was the world premiere of this thing. He sings Italian opera but it's all about things he does in his everyday life. So the super titles are there, and it's quite amusing at Dixon Place. And then there's Portrait of Jason. This movie has been around since 1967. It was a breakthrough documentary. Ingmar Bergman said it was the greatest thing he ever saw, which is saying something.
Well, Shirley Clark, who made it, was a really brilliant documentarian.
But I have to say, I mean, it's an hour and a half with this African-American gay man, 1967. If you think we invented sex and gayness and all this kind of stuff, no, this will disavow you of that. There's a little clip of Jason there.
You want to listen to him for a second?
Sure.
Teacher who doesn't teach in the public school system, but she goes from house to house teaching kids that can't go to school. And one day on the street, she said something to me very hip. She said, Jason, everyone in New York has a gimmick, and mine is teaching school. So I found out that mine was hustling. Now, I have more than one hustle. I'll come on as a maid or a butler or a flunky, anything to keep from punching the clock from 9 to 5, because...
So Jason is a self-described hustler. That's not his real name, Jason Holiday. And but the people who made this movie were kind of out to get him a little bit, too. They were kind of angry at him because he can be a big effing bore. He died in 1998. But endlessly fascinating as well, but yet kind of disturbing to watch because he ends up in tears and all this other kind of stuff.
I'm sure.
And all those kinds of things. So that's it. I saw that down at the, what did I say?
Film
IFC.
Oh, no, IFC?
I think this was...
Okay.
Yeah, City IFC Center.
All right, that's it for us for this week. Find out more about meningitis, get your vaccine, and we will see you next week.
Bye-bye.